لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. What I wanted to do for today was to speak about getting ourselves ready to to return to the world and what this entails. And this topic in itikaf, in spiritual retreat, is really aligned with what I call the inner work. Because in reality, although it appears we were doing the inner work here in itikaf and spiritual retreat, the real inner work starts when we leave itikaf. So in reality, there's really only a couple of things, couple of factors or variables that need to be experienced in itikaf. The first is the self-struggle, the sense of struggling with oneself to not only arrive here physically, but to get into this space spiritually. And once we're there, to begin kind of swimming in that space of the open heart, of the awakened heart, and to explore contemplatively all the Islamic spiritual practices um, in our seeking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in our remembering of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in our contemplating the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in our the remembrance of Allah, and in our meditating upon Allah's presence and his qualities. In the context that we already laid out, the four pillars of spiritual realization, or the four pillars of spirituality, or the four pillars of spiritual knowledge, how these pillars point to what the underlying nature of your being is as spirit and as ruh. Each one of these pillars point, kind of to that. So the work entailed in this, in opening the heart, these are the two real variables that, if by the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you are awakened to, then I would call this a mubarak i'tikaf, a successful, a very blessed spiritual retreat. That if you have actually, with your effort, your human struggle, your self struggle, and the grace of God, you have opened the heart, or the heart has been opened for you, which is a better formulation, the spiritual heart. And you've sat in it enough, you've rested in it enough, you've struggled in it enough, you've encountered some of your emotions, if not all of them, enough, to some degree, because usually you will not encounter all of your emotions, but some of the ones that to some degree actually affect you a lot. And you've encountered your thoughts, and even as the days and the nights go by, there is a feeling that Allah Ta'ala is slowly bringing us out, and then it becomes quite obvious, not when you get kicked out by the master of the house, but that you are actually coming out psychologically, spiritually from the itikaf. And this is part of the process, like the divine pull to come to the itikaf, and the yearning for the spiritual retreat, and then what occurs in the retreat, and then a sense of now something shifting in you that's allowing a preparation to return to the world that you were occupying before, but in a state of grace, in a state of spiritual transformation to some extent. These are really, like, if you hit these two variables, and then this sense of to returning now, this I would call a Mubarak retreat, right? You've to some degree experienced the essential stages, the essential stages of the spiritual retreat. So this cannot be kind of overemphasized. And so this talk for today is specific to the awakening of the recognition of an inner work that now needs to be done with what we have realized by the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the grace of God in our experiences in the spiritual retreat. You may have, if you've done multiple spiritual retreats, you may have had some certain profound insights, or very numerous insights. If it's your first one, all the same, you might have had some amazing awakenings or spiritual, openings, or some kind of shift. But I want to bring attention to, and actually the murid who's resting now, he had asked me this, and this is the exact same, kind of point I was going to make. And I'll formulate it in the way he stated it, but I will label it now. Spiritual deja vu. I will say it in the formulation of, who had, asked it last night, and it was a perfect formulation. He was speaking from his own state that, Ya Sheikh, I have entered states where I have an insight into myself, and I realize that I've been in this place to before in this inner state, and I've received the same insight, whether in my own muraqabah a year ago, a few months ago, and I come into this place and it's much more sharp and profound, and I can see that this is the change I want to be, and or this insight I want to take it. To then come back maybe for for the majlis a month later, or to return to itikaf and have a same insight as if I had totally forgotten it, and now I'm back there. It's the same exact insight, right? So I call this spiritual deja vu, right? In the sense that you realize you've been here before, and you're having the same insight of what needs to be done, an insight into yourself and what needs to be done to procure a shift in how you understand yourself and in relation to whatever personal challenge or opportunity that occurs in your life, and then the resolve to embody this new you and to change yourself, like this transformation, so inward and outward, right? And those who have been in itikaf, even to myself included, this is why I call it spiritual deja vu. You enter a state where you perceive that, and then you realize that although I left with this insight, for example, last year, there's something that has not fully transformed in me that would allow the change in my character, in my behavior to be sustained. And here I am again, having that same experience or that insight, and it's the same exact one. And I recognize it. And then there's a sense of frustration that what just happened? A whole year went by and I have not changed, or I did not take this insight and totally integrate it, right? It will be for those who come into itikaf, there will be some things like this for you, where you will notice this, that God speaks to you, or there's an angelic insight of inspiration that comes and you see it as a decisive matter, like that's it. This is what I need to do. I'm going to do this as I return to the world. You go and you return to the world, and at some point, that insight is lost on you, or at least the trying to transform, kind of oneself, right? And so then there's a frustration. So I call this spiritual deja vu, because deja vu means it's as if you're seeing something again. Spiritually, you're seeing something again, the same thing you saw, a year ago, or the same thing you saw a month ago, and you feel like you're back in square one, right? This is probably a universal experience, or maybe it's just me. All you, mashallah, are the realized sages, right? But this is very significant. So I want to speak to this question, and that this experience is something that happens to many, if not every, like it happened to every seeker. And this is a part of dhikr. It's a part of remembrance. You're remembering again that insight. Why are you remembering it? This is very important, because you've returned back to your spiritual heart, and you're living in it. And those perceptions, those insights have been waiting for you. They've been right there, just buried in your being, that then we begin to cover up because we get immersed into the world. Like we were immersed in itikaf, we become immersed in the world, and we forget. It covers, us. So this beautiful insight from Allah is there, and we are unable to act upon it, where we are unable to have the himma and the resolve to transform ourselves, right? This has happened to me every itikaf, Wallahi al-Azim, every itikaf I do. But to the extent that I return and I see that there has been a shift, there has been a transformation, this is what we can call the divine acceptance. In fact, to have the insight is a divine acceptance, right? To be able to come in to free the heart in spiritual retreat, in a state of contemplative meditation, contemplation, and to receive the insights either for the first time or again is a Mubarak insight. It is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah will show us by this, by the qadr of Allah, that you were ready there for the insight, but perhaps not for the transformation. And that's okay. But understand what's happening. You're not a failure. You're not a failure. This is just a struggle when we go back out to be in a state of self-struggle again, and the mujahada to establish what Allah gave us, what we received from God, to establish it inwardly first and foremost, and to bring it out outwardly in our actions, in our behavior, in our interactions. So this is what I call for myself spiritual deja vu. And may Allah Ta'ala minimize your spiritual deja vus, but may you have them, because it's a very beautiful matter, because it shows us some profound things. It shows us that knowledge, insight, and spiritual perception is state dependent. Now, I don't mean the state of Maryland, the state of New York. I mean your internal state, entering the spiritual heart. So the fact that you have those insights in such a decisive way means it's because you've returned to the heart, which has been finally freed up again, and you're living there. And those angels with those insights are just waiting. Well, welcome back. Nuzulam min Ghafurur Rahim. This is a hospitable gift from the one who always forgives and shows mercy. It's the same refreshments of insights, which refreshes you. And then an intention at some point is made. You bring this into your supplication. Oh Allah, help me, help me. Ya Allah, help me bring this out. Thank you so much for this insight. I feel inspired. I want to bring this out. This is very, very important, and it's a cycle that sometimes we can fall into, and it's natural. So I want you all to understand this, and hence the need for cyclical returns, not necessarily once a year, but perhaps once a month, so that we touch more deeply those internal states of being of the spiritual heart that we had arrived at and that we had tasted here. Because your spiritual retreat freed up your spiritual heart and you received those insights. We must return to the insights, and we must plant those insights into us even more, right? As a seed that is plowed. We must wound the soul with this insight, with these intuitions, and ask Allah, as He gave us them in this state, to establish us in them so that we're firmly rooted, so that these insights branch out and flower into the fruits of steadfastness, istiqamah on this matter, right? So steadfastness of these insights first inwardly, and steadfastness in acting upon them outwardly. This is the most, you could say, the second most important, or the third. I talked about the two variables of self-struggle and then settling in, right? The stages, and now to returning. For a Mubarak return, no matter how much you embody of the insights that you received, this is a critical insight and stage, and really the real beginning of the inner work that will now begin as we return to the world. So what do I mean by this? If we've done enough of the mujahada of the nafs here, with working with our physical bodies and our minds being more one-pointed, more concentrated in your devotions and in your invocations, in your meditations, in your contemplation, and in your interactions in spiritual companionship, and especially in your self reflections, even writing notes of insights and what you want to do. You're inspired and you would like this, or rather what you ask Allah to sustain in you, right? That is an important landmark of the mujahada. So if you have done this, you have worked with your nafs, with the help of the aql, the contemplative intellect that has also, kind of awakened in the context of an awakened heart, right? The spiritual heart in Sufi teachings is not just, or is not actually an emotional center. The emotional center that is also called the heart is more outward, extrinsic to the psychic domain, to the psyche, that is, the psycho emotions. That's important, but that's not the spiritual heart. You all have touched, contacted, and even awakened, opened, and set free to freed up the spiritual heart due to the barakat and the fadail and the ni'mah or the na'im of itikaf, of spiritual retreat. Now it's a matter of taking this, as kind of, as emphasizing. So my advice to myself and to all of you is to understand that spiritual transformation will not happen without integrating that perception, that spiritual perception of the heart, with an attitude that you cultivate and the will and the determination to express it, to embody it and carry it out, even as you fail at it again and again and again. This intention and orientation is very important, very important, as we return, and all of this, meaning as we return to the world. And so all of this is the beginning of the inner work, because now we've isolated the spiritual heart, right? We've freed it up. Nothing benefits the spiritual retreat and frees the heart more than meditation, contemplation, sustained, that is, meditation, contemplation, etc. Here, especially for the Sufis, meditation or fikr is the state of meditation of the heart. It's the state of meditation, right? And this is very important, that not only the practices, but the retreat, awakens us, frees the heart to be in the condition, in the state of a more perpetual meditation as a state, more than as a practice. When we are in that, now we know how the heart tastes. There's an experiential landmark of this self-perceiving and even the spiritual energies that come through the heart. So very, very important. The inner work entails working with the nafs, the ego self, and the body mind, and the intellect, which is the mindful or contemplative intellect, and the spiritual heart. All of these three have to work together in order to procure this inner steadfastness with the resolve, with the insights that you received in itikaf, and bringing it out, right? So that we lessen the amount of what I called as spiritual deja vu that occurs as we return to a retreat, even in a minor form like a khalwa, a month later, or a majlis, where we're more established in suhbah and the dhikrullah, rather than a whole year later where we return to the same insights, right? Because we've entered again the state of the spiritual heart, the state of meditation, a prolonged meditation, the meditative state, in a prolonged way. And because we're living in the heart, all those perceptions are coming again, because they've been waiting there. So the first key is to return to this experience, to this experiential state, by dedicating time in your spiritual lives or in your life for some element of retreat in your home or in nature, in a cyclical way that's not too far off, like not, a year later, I'll come back to this, right? But rather something like once a month, but to dedicate half a day, if you can, to various activities in your house or in nature, where we are where we do the same practices that we did in itikaf, but by ourselves. And in that, when you return to the state, or of the freed and open heart as you will. And when you remind yourselves of the texture and the taste of the practices, contemplating the four pillars, experiencing them, you will have a remembrance of them, a recollection, a dhikr, the dhikra of them in your fikra. You'll have this as you return. This is the first advice. And you will encounter a good sign will be that if you stay open, just the you can say the intention being seeking God by returning to a freed up heart, a freed up spiritual heart. You will you will encounter the texture of these intuitions again. You all know what I'm talking about. You will encounter those intuitions again, and it's there then after your khalwa or your time for various spiritual practices, Quran recitation, um, devotional prayers, salatul tasbih, sitting in silent in the muraqabah, contemplating the silence, contemplating stillness, all of these as God's presence, right? These will be evoked again, these perceptions, these intuitions. Write them down after you're done. Ask Allah for tawfiq and taysir, facilitation in expressing these, in living this. Ask Allah and stay open, and whatever arises as an impulse of an inspiration, a motivation spiritually to do something that embodies this, write it down and make a commitment that you will do those actions that now have intuitively come from the heart to align you and support you in stabilizing and deepening those insights and bringing them out. So this would be my second advice, right? To write them down and um, to make a resolve and continue supplicating unto Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My third advice here is, again, although you have now a plan, a determination, it's not about those actions. It's about maintaining something of that state of being as you do them, even imperfectly or to a lesser extent than you're imagining, right? But whether it's an insight to be more present for your spouse, to whether it's an insight to be more present for your patients or your parents, or your children, or kind of in your work, or it's whether it's an insight to be more present, as the stillness, as the silence, as the wakefulness, as the emptiness, whatever it is, as the breath, right? Um, when you encounter those strong emotions that you feel derail you, right? Or whatever circumstances bring you out of your center, because you know now in itikaf, in spiritual retreat, what it is to be aligned with your center, living from there, praying from there, going to the bathroom from there, being in sohbah from there, laughing from there, losing your cool from there, losing your center from there, and coming back. You now have experienced all of this, even if the amplitude is not like what it would be outside from, from here. You've encountered all of that, and that is knowledge of self. It's knowledge of self. So important to then maintain that, be able to return to practice returning to the heart, finding ways to do so as a means of a knowledge of self due to your muhasabah, from present moment to muhasabah. And you will see that will be helpful, right? So again, it's about the state of being that procures the perceptions and that presence. The actions won't cause the presence. You've tasted that presence, you've lived there by the grace of God. Now take that with you. Try to keep some of you here in terms of your attentiveness as you engage in the world, and allow that to guide you into navigating all the world, the joys of the world and the difficulties or the sorrows of the world. Allow that state of being, be conscious of even to a subtle extent of that state of being helping you navigate in all these things, right? And that maybe you may have isolated in yourself a reflection, certain thoughts that come a lot, or certain emotions or emotive states. It's important to work with that, right? And this is really an interrelation and interaction, a siyasat, the politics of the experience of the self, of the centers of the self, of the nafs and the aql, right? The ego self and the intellect and the spiritual heart, right? And in engaging these, right, we're talking about touching that spiritual heart again, the perceptions come. Then to make a resolve with the intellect and to make sure that the intellect allows this to see things through into the nafs. When we notice from these states what we're actually caught up in, when we have a heightened sense of it, this is where working with, for example, the human presence becomes important, where we attempt to gather ourselves more in those circumstances that we are entirely veiled from our heart presence or entirely from God, and we lose ourselves in them. Whether it's a particular sin that you may return to, may Allah protect us from that. But may us, Ameen, but may we also learn all the wisdom that Allah wills in His mercy in our return to those things inevitably, at least some of them, Ameen, right? Because all of this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until it's not. And all of that is easy for Allah. For the secret of istiqamah is simply to stay and to abide in the heart, to have isolated your heart to yourself, your heart for God, to remain isolated in your heart for yourself and for God as you return to it, to the world. This is easy for God to help you with. That something of your inner heart and inner being stays in the space and the realization of the spiritual retreat, right? And allows you to navigate these things, right? So don't lose hope if you end up sinning again. You have gained amazing insights that if you return to, don't block yourself from losing hope, but rather engage the slip, the mess up from this place, from this awakened place. Don't allow it to sabotage the realizations Allah actually gave you. And the more you bring as openness, the openness of heart into these places that you are afraid to bring it into, because you resist that, the more they will slowly fall away. And istiqamah of the hudur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of presence, will prevail, right? Truth has come and falsehood vanishes. And falsehood verily is bound to vanish. Your otherness from God cannot stand for long. The light of God, God's presence. Bring this in there. Have the courage to bring it all in there. And that will show you your hangups. It will begin to show you your hangups. Allow this realization, however small or big, insights, be your inner sheikh, be your inner guide that helps you from this fitra'i spiritual intelligence to help you navigate. And you have access to your sheikh. In that context, ask him or her, ask him or her to, I have this insight, I have this challenge, I have received this. Is this a good way for me to approach this? Not just, is this a good way to approach it? Is this a good way for me to, or you can start with, is this a sound insight, A, and B, is this a good way for me to approach navigating and integrating, right? My human presence into the divine presence, unveiled from the heart of the spiritual presence, right? I spoke of the egoic consciousness, the spiritual consciousness, and the sanctified consciousness. Really, the attempt here is to bring out the awakened spiritual consciousness to integrate the egoic consciousness, to make it more lighter, more transparent. And once it's fully aligned with the divine will, this then evokes or awakens the sanctified consciousness, which can become a station to bi'idhnillah in you, right? And in this regard, we will know when we are having problems with the human presence, with the lack of integration of the human presence, then we will know from the muhasabah to work there more. But where are you working from? You should be working from intellect, but also from the heart, the spiritual heart. And this is the divine presence that you're working with to integrate the human presence. right? But in practice, if you notice, we we tried to come to a place of stillness and still the human presence so that we awaken to the divine presence. Once we live there, we bring the divine presence back out so that there's a wrestling match kind of, right? There's a little bit of wrestling, as they say, right, in this process, integrating, right? There's integration to the extent possible. There's still a level of the mujahada being done here. When there's more integration, spiritual integration of these egoic tendencies, the tendencies of the lower self, and they're more aligned, then that integration itself will allow us to navigate as we did in qigong, right? We'll be able to intuitively know when we're more aligned and when we're out of alignment, even though we might be doing all the right things. Once we awaken the more subtle consciousness and we're operating from there, that intuitive sense will help us know, okay, I'm doing everything right, but maybe that's the problem. Too much doing and not enough of being in the practice. That is the practice of life, right? So these insights from just our regular conscious in the laboratory practice of being in the masjid or the zawiya or at our homes and on the prayer rug, right? We're bringing these tools out now, these awakened tools, and we're using them for the real practice, for the real game. That's the practice of life as we return to the world, right? And it is an interplay really ultimately of the egoic consciousness with the spiritual consciousness and eventually the sanctified consciousness that is in full alignment with the unfolding of how to live our life spiritually, contemplatively, as contemplative living. This doesn't mean you're going to be perfect, like you're a saint. I just mean simply a sanctified consciousness that's aligned with the divine intent and the divine will and way of doing things that I also call at times the prophetic presence, to be contemplating your prophetic presence as you engage in the world. Well, when someone upsets you, do you go immediately into the egoic consciousness in reactivity, or do you stop and return in the present moment to the divine consciousness or the spiritual consciousness, the divine presence? And from there you respond. And even if you fail, you've done something. You've undone a cycle, a karmic cycle, an egoic cycle of action and reaction that reinforces a particular tendency that veils the heart from its spiritual center and spiritual presence with God. Right. The more we do this and interact from here, the more we get a feel for this. This is the subtle inner work that continues, and Allah will be happy to bring you challenges because He's so happy that you've reached this place. So make no mistake, they will come. That's just the nature of things. What's that? Yes, mashallah.
With gentleness and
yes, Ameen. Ameen. And don't worry that they will come. But with gentleness and the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the ease of Allah, the ease of the facilitation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will come. Be aware of this. But if we are, the more inwardly we are resting in, living in, even in our moments of being alone, on the prayer mat, in the zawiya, by ourselves, the more we recollect, or the more we sit even for 2 minutes, 5 minutes back into meditation, into prayer, if we have learned the taste of each of the pillars, they can realign us a lot faster. And the more we're there, then we will resonate with what needs to be done from there, from this state of being, from the being part, right? So you can do all the right things extrinsically and follow the sacred law. But if change is not occurring, it's because you're still dominated by the egoic consciousness, by the Nafs. The human presence is not integrated enough, or not aligned, or not still enough for the akal to really move into the heart in this process, this spiritual process of the politics of spiritual experience. in your meditation, when you're struggling to sit, right? I'll speak of this experientially. When you're just struggling to just be present, that's nafsani consciousness, like that's nafs, experientially to relating with it. When you've been able to focus or bring yourself back to the center repeatedly and you're more one focused, that's the activated mindful or contemplative intellect. And when this intellect turns more inward and all the energies are aligned, you've awakened to qalb. Now you're fully present as yourself. And now you're fully present for God. Or you can say more present, more gathered for God. And this awakens intuitions, feelings even, and perceptions that when you return to them, even as in the kind of subtle passing insights, that's a tasting again of the heart. So follow those back when they arise in your struggle, in your mujahada of your practices, and stay with them and try to learn yourself in your own way, intuitively, how to align with them as you navigate all the roles in your life and all the challenges that arise in public and in private. Right? This is very important. And this is the process of what could be called istiqama, inwardly and outwardly, right? If that first stage of itikaf, as we mentioned on the first night, perhaps is this stage of toba, the struggling to return to just being here in the space, psychologically, physically, spiritually. And the next stage of itikaf is to deepen in taqwa, right? In the awareness of the divine presence that really fills and is the vastness of the heart, right? Then bringing this or allowing, not even just bringing by your own self, allowing, giving yourself permission for Allah to help you bring this heart out and integrate it still with everything, right? That is istiqama, steadfastness, which is inward as an attitude and outward as a behavior, as a character embodiment. So character embodiment is both of these two things, cultivating that attitude. So to procure this transformational process is to learn, as you all have experientially, how to return even for a moment to these 4 or 5 spiritual pillars, the pillars of spiritual knowledge and realization. The fifth would be, as I was speaking to the friends, from our point of view, is the breath, to engage the breath, which aligns itself in its own way with all the 4 pillars and can arguably be said to be the main pillar in the center that brings them all together. And when you're in each pole, our relation to the breath, or when you're in each pillar of spirituality, well, whether it's silence or stillness, or hunger or wakefulness, the relation to the breath is subtly distinct, and there's a specific quality. And that's a beautiful way to come back to use the breath, which is a dynamic kind of pillar that we can use at any moment as a way of stopping ourselves, just taking a breath or a sigh of relief and helping ourselves to become aware and return to stillness, even for a moment or two. And you'll be surprised at what you can extract from your recollection just by that, because of your experiences here and of your more firmly rooting those experiences in a cyclical khalwa, right? Which will then, help you as if a mirror to show you what work needs to be done. God will let you know, I want you to work on this. You got a few other things to do, but this, I want you to work. This is priority. That will come. And then this you can speak to your sheikh about as these arise. This is suluk by direct experience. This is the inner work that you're using tahqiq, self-verification and realization to help navigate from what you've tasted to whatever that's been, to navigate from there. And as you navigate, you are simultaneously deepening that realization and you're embodying it. That's really the secret. And the other secret is to continue to beseech Allah for help. Continue to ask God for the facilitation. The Islamic path is a simultaneous path of surrendering and knowing and surrendering. It's both at the same time, right? It's ma'rifah and taslim. It's both at the same time. We continually are trying to do this. So this is more or less what I wanted to say. Allow me in this context to mention and then we'll end, inshallah, at least from my part, and I can open the floor for comments online and here or questions, but that these stages can also, again, be aligned. These stages of itikaf, where you're interacting from, the open heart that has occurred, the benefit of the heart from spiritual retreat. If and all you have, your heart, whether you know it or not, your heart is open and you've been operating from there the majority of the time here. Even if you don't to believe you have been. Just have to take a look at that. And you'll know for sure when you leave to where you were operating from here and where you're operating from there. So if you don't know now, you will know. So know before you know, right? Know before, really know to before you experientially know, right? Like, wow, like I was kind of in my heart there, bro, right? Like, or like, yeah, Allah was there in my heart. Not, now I'm not, right? Right. So being in the heart, having the heart freed for more contemplative states of deepened yet relaxed meditation, states of meditation. This is what Islamic spirituality, kind of emphasizes, the states of meditation that are procured by spiritual practices. And that is aligned to or akin or identical to an open heart. ذَلِكَ لِذِكْرَ لِمَنْ كَانَ لَهُ قَلْبٌ. Right? As Allah says, this is a remembrance for the one who has a heart. Doesn't everyone have a heart? Yes, but not really. So the one who possesses their heart, who has a heart, is a conscious, awakened heart. This is what the retreat is for, right? To allow you to finally have a heart, right? Yay, I found my heart. I have a heart. I'm going to walk out with my heart. Like, this is not your lovey-dovey heart. Although I'm making it a kind of joke, I'm trying to get into the hall of my daughter or something. Oh, found the heart. That's really nice. That's great. But we're talking about even a more special heart, more vast heart. The more we do this, this is really what has occurred, and acknowledge it, even if you think you don't believe it. Acknowledge it. All right, acknowledge it, that you have entered what I would call second level practice with all your practices in the retreat, at the least. Even though you go back into first level and you're struggling sometimes with a particular practice, you're tired, but you're operating, actually, your main place you're operating from is the second level practice, which is like the second degree of self-realization, which is that of the awakened heart. You're operating from here. You're seeing your faults come back. You're like, why are they coming back? It's because your soul is getting ready to leave. So the psyche is also happy. So it's beginning to remember those things that you had forgotten for at least a few days. That's happening. It's natural. It's inevitable. Those don't stop. Your relation to them is what needs to change, is what needs to be transformed. When you sustain second level practice, it will awaken in as an embodiment in character as third level, which is really the discovery or the awakening of you could say the pure spirit or the sir, your inmost secret with God. Really, the goal is just to get you to second level practice. That once you're established there, it'll take care of the rest. It'll take care. The mind is more interiorized, even if it goes and it loses itself here and there. It remembers its real home, and it begins to come back to a state of contemplative inwardness, even amidst outwardness. And then you're navigating everything from there. This is the secret, the real secret to istiqamah. To touch those places in your practice that you experienced here. Those are landmarks. You know how to get there. You've been there. You're just going to be out of there, and you need to just learn your way back because you know where it is. Like, it's like you have to go to the airport. It's a location. You know where it is. No matter how far you are, you will get there. Same thing to the bus station, to wherever, you know where it is. And now you know, alhamdulillah, now you know where that is. Just return there, be nourished from there, find ways to do so in meditation practice, in the dhikrullah, in all of these things, in virtuous service to others, all the combination of all of these things, and just simply being present for your family with an open heart. Even if this brings up tough emotions and challenges or irritations, navigate all that, live that, respond from your heart. It's exactly like when we are beginning our meditation practice, to whatever practice it is at any point in time. We enter it, so we stop. There's a little challenge there to stop. Finally, we're gathered, the mind is gathered. We may sink in a guided meditation or your own meditation. And at some point, we end the meditation, but the heart is still open, even as you open your eyes. And for some moments, you come out to your regular experience from that heart. This is what now has been prolonged, almost like beyond states, almost as small stations, like stepping places, places of standing. You can now more consciously return and stand from there and walk from there and navigate from there. That is really what the real goal of the inner work is as you return to the world from spiritual retreat. And as a final note here, I'll give an example. What do I maybe mean by first level practice and second level practice and third level practice, or first degree realization and a practice, second degree self-realization, and the third? Let's take the Shahada, La ilaha illallah, right? When we invoke it or when we recite it, it's an activity, right? La ilaha illallah here as a body and as a mind that is performing it and moving in rhythm to purify ourselves, to polish the heart, is the station or the perception of the heart that God is an object of worship and that there is no object of worship except God. La ma'bud illallah. Here, la ilaha illallah is translated by the state of the heart as la ma'bud illallah, right? No object of worship except God. That there is no one that is to be worshipped. I'm not going to give my attention to other objects of perception except for that the most supreme, a divine object of my attention at the moment in my heart, Allah. La ma'bud illallah. Right. But the relation from the standpoint of self-awareness is that I am a person, I am a servant far from God, and I'm focusing on Him, or I'm worshiping Him. La ma'bud illallah, right? This is the first level perception or level of practice. And there is an awareness of what we are and what God is, kind of out here, far from us, right? Above the heavens, etc., from a spiritual standpoint of relationship. Then, due to the La ilaha illallah and the transformation that may occur inwardly, we may awaken to another mode of the Shahada as a perception, as a witnessing, right? La maqsood illallah, I think, for example, right? What does maqsood mean? Goal. There is no goal now other than God. God is now just not an object to be worshipped in my prayers, but as La ilaha illallah. That this means, of course, in Islamic teachings, that there is no object worthy of worship except Allah. Yes, this is the understanding. But then we move in our sense of perception of what we are. We are now actually a heart that has a goal, that has an attentiveness. And so la maqsood, no goal, no desired goal other than God, except God, right? We may then sustain that by the tawfiq of Allah as an awakened spiritual heart that may have happened here in spiritual retreat. As we say, La ilaha illallah, that we feel the reality of God. We witness the reality of God. We experience the reality of God as the one thing needful, right? The goal, the maqsood, la maqsood illallah. And as the awliya say, then the heart's perception may shift even more by a transformation very subtly to La mawjood illallah, right? I love these rhyming schemes of Arabic, right? The La mawjood illallah, right? There is nothing present except God's presence. An amazing, shift in the heart. What you see, these are three distinct perceptions of the heart. And this is an example of first level practice or first degree of self-realization, the second degree, and a third degree of self-realization, of self-awareness, one can say. What are you aware of when you've been focusing your life on properly worshiping Allah? He's an object of worship, and we are the ones who are worshiping as a person separate, which in the physical realm, yes, we're separate from each other, right? And obviously God is beyond. But when we move to beyond this spiritually, God becomes the intention, the goal, the desired goal of our hearts. God is now more subtle in our realization, in our seeking. We're not just trying to conform to proper worship. We're trying to reach him. He's the goal of our hearts. It's like you're trying to seek your lover. What are you then? You're a lover then. Your state is not just a person, it's a lover. So now your heart, your self-awareness, your self-perception, which is second degree of self-perception or awareness now, is that of a heart that is seeking. Everything. See how the goalposts have changed because you have changed your self-awareness from where you're looking from. Your state as the self, your own awareness of yourself has changed in this process of the deepening of La ilaha illallah. Then finally, La mawjood illallah. There's nothing present, right? Except God's presence, right? And now what are we? Now the heart is a pure spiritual presence. It's gone from being a heart that seeks to a heart that has arrived at its own presence and God's presence. And now La ilaha illallah helps us to even take us out of the way. And there's no presence except God's presence. There's nothing present except God. La mawjood illallah, right? And then we can even say, if we'd like, to beyond that, la mashhud illallah, right? Entirely coming out and full integration of the divine unity in witnessing. Everything as a disclosure and sign of God, inward and outward. And in this process, as an example, is what this beautiful process of kind of seeking, finding, and abiding is, and what the spiritual retreat offers you in all of its stages, as stages in duration, in progression, and also stages or levels of deepening in self-awareness and realization, spiritual realization. And may this be so for all of us. Alhamdulillah, Ameen. And I pray this was helpful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
لا إله إلا الله 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 لا إله إلا الله